Hello, everyone. You're welcome to another SQL session or sequel. Okay, so today we would be discussing on very important part of sequel. Okay, we're going to be discussing something very important, and that is the group by clause. Okay, group by clause. Now, this session is going to be very the intention here is to explain group by in such a way that it could be very much simplified, okay, because of how important it is in SQL. All right, now the reason why this explanation is necessary is because a lot of newbies in SQL, even some intermediate persons, kind of find it a bit challenging in some aspects of group by, but I want you to have a great start and a very easy flow. Okay. So group buy is important, but it is not difficult. It is very easy, and you will bear me witness by the content of this session. Okay. So before we get into the practicals on group buy, as usual, we need to understand what group buy is, what it does. Okay. So what is group buy? It's still English, to group things, right? So I would just break it down into certain steps to explain group by. First of all, group by, let me maximize. Okay. So first of all, I would say that the group by clause, where is it running to? Okay, let me. I would say that the group by clause allows you to group rows, all right? And you're grouping them based on one or more columns. We'll get into the explanation, all right? The next thing here is that we also need to understand that group by group by it is used with aggregate functions. All right, with aggregate functions. That is why we had to touch on aggregate functions before getting into group by. In short, personally, I could say that group by was birthed out of aggregate functions, or it was because of aggregate functions that group by came into existence. And we are going to see why. So it is used with aggregate functions. I think that should be okay. Then the next thing is this, that it is used to generate summaries. Yeah, summary information. Okay, let's say it's used to generate summaries. Let me just make it summary information for each group. Yeah, it might look a bit fuzzy right now, but I will try to break it down. Now, when we say group by, the first thing we are saying is that it allows you to group rows. Okay. Now you are grouping the rows based on one or more columns. All right. When we start the practicals, you would understand this better. The next aspect of it is that group by is used with aggregate functions. So, can you use group by without aggregate functions? I could boldly say no, because majority of the SQL platforms would not accept group by with non-aggregate functions. And when we were talking about aggregate functions in our previous sections, we explained, or I explained certain things. All right, I talked about sum, the difference between sum and the addition operand, right, which is the plus. So those are non-aggregate functions. All right, so is it possible to get the source of group by without including aggregate functions? You would see that it is not possible as at now, as at this time of the recording, okay, because we don't know what could happen in the nearest future. But group by was made majorly, I would say majorly, for the aggregate functions, okay? And you understand why. It is used to generate summary information for each group. So the entire idea of group by clause starts from this last sentence. The essence of group by is to generate summary information for each group, because when we talk about group by, it is creating certain things in groups. Okay, so now let us see what we mean. I would say let's check out a skill. Let's look at select. We created a table, right? And that table was items or orders. Okay, select all from orders. Fine. Now we have this as our items. Okay, so we have the items, we have the item category, we have the price. Let's go look at our definition. So let's look at the first thing. It says it allows you to group rows based on one or more columns. Okay, okay. Interestingly, I would like to check a more robust table so that we could explain that, and we have such in the students registration table, right? So let's do that. Let's check the student registration. Great, awesome. Now we have this, okay? And recall that when we were doing the likes of distinct, we talked about we're trying to get information from location, right? So let's check that definition again. It allows you to group rows based on one or more columns. Okay, so now let us say we have the location. So let me just run that query, and which is going to be the select location. Okay, select location from students registration. And we have this. So we have this, and recall that when we made it distinct, it gave us this. All right, it gave us this. And when we wanted to do a count, we could just do count, and we put this, and we get this, because count is an aggregate function. All right, now let's step back a little and go back to this list. So, what do I want to achieve here? I want to group this. Okay. So it says I'm creating them in groups. That's what it means. So let's see what is going to happen if I add a group by to this query. So I would say group by location. When I run this, you see there is really nothing much happening here, and you can see that there is a difference, although, but it's not a very exciting difference. This is group by, this is it without group by, and this is it with group by. Okay, now if I, let me copy this on another cell block. If I do this without group by and I just run distinct, what should I expect? I'm getting the same result. Look at it. I'm getting the same result. This for distinct, okay, island down to Morocco. And this for group by location, island down to Morocco. So why do we have this? Okay, so you can see that what group by did was to group them. There's no distinct keyword here. All right. So, but what group by did, the group by clause groups them. And when you're grouping something, obviously it looks like a distinct. Okay, so if I have apples, oranges, and I have soaps, and I have toothpaste, I have phone, and so let's group this. The apples and oranges definitely will be in a group of fruits, right? Then the iron and maybe phones will be in a group of electronics. So you have already made a distinction just by grouping things. So I don't need to call the distinct keyword when I'm using group by, because group by its characteristics put things in a distinct way. Okay, but why do we need group by when we can achieve the same thing with distinct? You can even see the explanation here. The words used are even more compared with these things. So the thing is, this is not why you need group by. You don't need group by just to give you a list of distinct values, all right? Else the distinct is going to do the work. Okay? So we are just trying to explain the steps we have mentioned here. That group by allows you to group rows based on one or more columns. We are going to see the more columns later, okay? We could even see something like let's say we have, say, should I say course? Okay, let's say we have course, and I want to make this. So you can see, you have grouped by more than one column. Okay, so you are using two columns here to achieve this. All right, so you have 21 rows affected, Morocco 3, Morocco 1, but this does not, it's not really sensible. It's not really sensible. There is almost no logic in this. All right, now when I started explaining, I said the major definition, if you look at these steps that are outlined here, the sense starts from the last part, which really explains what group by is in reality. So the first step says it allows you to group rows based on one or more columns. We've seen that. All right, we've seen that, and there is no much logic in it. Okay, the next steps brings an additional logic to it. Okay, it is used with aggregate functions. All right, it is used with aggregate functions. And the next is, it is used to generate summary information for each group. All right, so now you could see that we did not use aggregate functions. All right, we did not use aggregate functions here, and obviously you realize that it's not sensible because we didn't use aggregate functions. Okay, so it's not it doesn't look realistic. There is no logic in it. So for group by to make sense, you need to have aggregate functions as part of the statements. All right, and why is that necessary? Because of the last point noted here, it is used to generate summary information for each group. This is the original sense of group by, to generate a summary of each group that has been created. So you don't use group by just to create groups, but you use group by to bring out summaries of each group. And when we talk about summary, when we say summary information, okay, we are talking about calculations. Okay, so it all means calculations. That means to be able to achieve a summary, then you will need to involve calculations, and these calculations are the aggregate calculations, or I would say aggregations. Okay, so I could just do calculations or aggregations. All right. So group by is used to generate a summary, or generate summary information for each group. Or I could say it is used to generate calculations for each group. And this is how group by begins to make sense. For example, I'm looking at the location and I'm looking at course. Let's just go by one column. Okay. If I say count all, which is an aggregate function, and I run this, what do I have? I have a logical output that gives me the distinct values and tells me that from Ireland we had one person that registered. From Canada we have one person, from South Africa six people registered. Like that, it goes on and on and on. Okay? So I would want to, this is like an odd value, Cross River States, since everything here is a country. So let me just quickly delete that value. So I will just run skill and say select or delete from students registration where location equals Cross River State. Okay, so since this is lowercase and I don't want any case sensitivity, so let me just remove the case sensitivity. So delete from student registration where location. So this should remove everything about, yeah, so far as affected. Okay, so that should be okay for us. And when I come here to check where was I. All right, so this we are grouping by. So when I run this, I can see that the state is no longer there. All right, so now we can see that including the aggregate function has made us see the spice, the effect of group by. Okay, so group by has given us a summary information about this location. All right, so that means how many persons registered. Okay, we have Ireland 1, South Africa 6, Nigeria 6. Okay, so now this is for one column. I could go ahead and say I also want to check. Let's look at the table and let's say, okay, let's look at source of joining as an additional effect. So I also want to check the source of joining. Just watch and see what this is going to produce. Okay, so I would put this as a grouping by comments or clause. Let me just break this. Okay, so I what I want to do here is, okay, I need a comma here. So I want to check the location and not just group them by the location, but I want to group them by the source of joining as well. Like, okay, I want to understand in Nigeria how many persons registered through Facebook, in or how many persons registered through Instagram or through referrals in Nigeria. So in different countries, it should give me that information. So if I run this, you can see what happens here. It is showing me that in Ghana, I have one person that registered through LinkedIn. In Morocco, one through referral. So we could see another Morocco here. Just to make this thing in order, I could also add my order by clause. Okay, so that we could see all the countries coming together. So I'll say order by what's location. So when I run this, you can see that, okay, fine, we have Canada. All right, and so that means we had only one person from Canada, and that one person joined through Instagram. And we have one person, we have three people from Ghana. That's what it shows here. And for each of them, each of the three belongs to Google LinkedIn referral. They came in, three of them came separately from Google LinkedIn referral. Okay. So then we have Ireland, which we had only one person. Okay. Jamaica had three people, and one was from Facebook, one came in. So you could see how the group by clause, it's now bringing in so much intelligence in producing the summary of the information we need. So it's giving us a summary of certain columns that we called out. Okay, so with that you can fully understand what these three statements are now. That group by allows you to group rows based on one or more columns. Okay, now this is the same thing as saying distinct. Okay, so it's like saying distinct. Now the next thing, it is used with aggregate functions. All right, and the next is it is used to generate summary information. All right, so if you read it from the last part up, you will see the real sense that is coming out from it. You say it is used to generate summary information for each group. How can this happen? With By adding aggregate functions to it. Okay, so when you use aggregate functions, then you can meet the need of the third point, which is generate summary. All right, now these aggregate functions, where are they applied? They are applied on the groups on the rows that have been grouped. So what the aggregate functions works on each of the groups. So what happens is it first gives you a distinct result, and then goes into each of the distinct results to apply the calculation of that aggregation. All right, so it applies the calculations gotten from the aggregation on each group, on each distinct item in that list. Okay, so that is simply what group by does. All right, now let me explain one thing. I will just give you, it's more like I will just call it a rule. Okay, so I will just give you only one rule. There's just one rule to always understand or to always apply. All right, when using group by, what is that rule? All right, so the rule is simple. In the select statements, so we have, you would mention columns in the select statement. So the rule is very simple. So for every, for every column mentioned in the select statements, for every column mentioned in the select statements, make sure every column mentioned in the select statements, group by, let's just make this, for every column mentioned in the select statement, there are two options. Okay, it should be represented in the group by clause, the group by clause, all right, or in an aggregate function. That is all. Just look at it and let it sink. I would explain with the practical. All right. So let us see what we mean. Now we have established these points, and let us try to bring out another point. Okay. So this is SQL, and let's say we are selecting. Let's try something. Okay, so let's select location. Okay, let's select location and sex from student registration. From student registration. All right, and then let's do a group by. Let's do a group by. Group by. Let's say group by location. This would give us an error. Why? Because we mentioned two columns here. Now there are two rules. There is one rule, okay, for this. It's either these two columns would be mentioned in the group by clause. So I could add sex to this for it to work. Okay. Like I said, it's not really it's not sensible here because there is no aggregation. So it's either this happens, or we have one of the columns inside an aggregation. All right. So I would say counts. I would say counts, and I want to do this. So what I'm trying to say here is, for every location, I want to see the number of male and female. All right. So I would do location, count sex, then do this by location. So when I run this, I'm seeing, oh, Ireland 1, Canada 1, South Africa 6. Okay. So, but this is not very explanatory because I could just put the sex here. All right. But as far as this is mentioned, look at, I'm going to still have an error. So this should be mentioned in the group by. All right. So when I run this, we could see this. So that means in Ireland, we had one female. All right. So like I would prefer you to do, so I would I would go to, let me bring this down. So I would, after this, order it by location so that it could show those the locations together. All right, because as it is now, we could have South Africa here, okay, and we have another record for South Africa here. So I would want to order it by location in any manner. In any manner, I could say in descending order, right? So when I do this, I'm having South Africa appearing twice, obviously, because the only sex that we mentioned in the table is just male and female. All right, so South Africa here shows us that there are six of them that are registered, two are female, four are males. Okay, the same thing in Nigeria, two female, four males. All right, so now you could see how sensible this information is. So the only rule you need to understand in group by, after understanding what group by does, that first of all, group by works well even without, it works, let me not use well, it works even without aggregation, but it's not, the result of that is not really sensible. All right, when you add aggregation, that is when you see the effect of a group by. Okay, so we have let's do one more. Let's do one more. So let's look at the table we created. Say select all, take this up. So select all from that was orders, right? Orders, yeah. So this is the table. So now what I want to do is I want to do some form of calculation here. I want to get I want to get these categories, okay? I want to get the total sales from each of these category, okay? From each of these categories. So I want to get the total sales. So group by is what is going to come to our rescue here. So what I would do here is I would select, all right, I would select, what do I need to do? I will select the category, item category, and then I would do quantity times price, right? Quantity times price. All right. So then this quantity times price, I would have to put it in a sum, in a sum function. So I would do this. All right. I would try and explain what I'm writing here, but just pay attention. So I would do this, then I would say from others. All right, then I would group by the item category. When I run this, yes, this is an issue. What is going on here? Okay, it says orders. Okay, the spelling OR. All right, so cool. I would just put an alias here, so I would say as total sales. Okay, so now we could see that what this means, what I did here is the quantity times price. I recall we did this when we were talking about, I think in the previous session. All right. So the quantity times price is going to give us, is just a calculation for each value. All right. So what I'm saying is I want you to give me the sum based on the item category. What it means here is it goes to fruits and checks if there is any other fruits. If this is the only thing, it gives me the item, the quantity times price, which is 5 times 700. And that should give us 3,500. All right. Then it goes into electronics. All right. And says, okay, for electronics, I have 4 times this amount. Okay. And then it adds it. Let's do a bit of Python code here so that I could explain that better. All right. So what it does is for the fruits, goes into the fruits, right, and says quantity times price, which is 5 times 700. All right. And this is the result, 3,500. And that's what we have here, right? Now, it goes into electronics. And electronics, it starts with this and says, okay, this is 4 times 450,000, right? 450,000. And it realizes that there is another there is another electronics here, right? So it adds that. So it adds that, okay? And it gives me what's the second electronics? That's going to be 6 times 4,500. And when we do that, it gives us 182, that is 1,1,827,000, which is this for electronics. So you could see the effects of group buy. All right. So this is when group buy makes sense, when aggregation is involved. However, when you use it without aggregations, it could work, but you won't see any logical sense in it, because the essence of group buy is to give you a summary of all the things that you are doing in the specified columns, and that summary are calculations, and the only calculations you can apply to group of rows are aggregations. All right. So in the next session would be exploring two very important items that could work comfortably with group buy. So they are either weapons or tools to group buy. Okay, stay tuned. Thank you very much.